PseudoPod is extruded into this universe from a dimension of purest fear. It's beautiful in its own alien way, but what's to come will unsettle you.
PseudoPod, April 1st. Yeah, 2022. Flash in the Borderlands 61. Dead Man's Party. Hey everyone, welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. I'm your host, Alistair, and this week our audio production is by the magnificent Marty, and we have a quote for you to open the show. Everybody's coming, leave your body at the door. Let's talk about philosophy. More specifically, about the philosophy of fun and how sometimes that philosophy can get a little dark, and how that darkness and the collision between life as we know it and life as it might be powers this week's trio of stories. One of the great philosophers of the 20th century once sang, "It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine." Another mused about the need to see his doctor about this itchy pentagram-shaped rash. The world is always ending, and our burden in the upper half of this decade, which has so far been an absolute dumpster fire, is to try and balance between two impossible truths before breakfast. Things are awful, everywhere, in every conceivable way, it often seems. And yet, merrily we roll along, because what other choice do we have? Or, to invoke a third philosopher, there may be trouble ahead. So while there's moonlight and music and love and romance, if you want those last two, of course, the moonlight, I feel, might be compulsory. Let's tell some true stories. First off, I am delighted to bring you The Tentacle and You by friend of the PseudoPod, John Wiswell. It was originally published in Nature Futures back in 2019. John is a disabled writer who lives where New York keeps all its trees. He is a Nebula winner, as well as a finalist for the Hugo, World Fantasy, British Fantasy, and Locus. He is now a finalist for 2 more Nebula awards, for his novelette, That Story Isn't the Story, and for his short story, For Lack of a Bed. His fiction has appeared on Uncanny Magazine, the LeVar Burton Reads podcast, and the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, among many other places. He loves PseudoPod. Aw, John, we love you too, and is tickled to bring his tentacles to it. Your reader for this story is Kaz, so get ready, because here comes the tentacle.
The Tentacle and You by John Wiswell. Read by Kaz. Congratulations on your new tentacle! You're probably one of the first people in your entire civilization to get this gift, and we know how overwhelming that can feel. That's why we've compiled a few tips to coach you early adopters through the first days of the rest of your lives. Welcome to the fold. Day 1. Already you should feel unprecedented vigor. Pursue whatever naturally drives you. Go body surfing, wrestle a bear, skydive without a parachute, do sex if that's your thing. Thanks to the tentacle's restorative properties, no injury or infection will last more than a few seconds. It's pretty cool, right? That durability is going to help you over the next week. The contact area of your tentacle may itch. Refrain from scratching or trying to remove it. Within the first 3 hours, the tentacle will have bonded with your nervous system such that agitation will cause it to override your motor control. Nobody likes walking around in public with deactivated arms. Spare yourself the embarrassment and embrace your new self. Day 2. You may notice yourself terminating unhealthy relationships without any of the remorse you'd always anticipated. Your priorities are the tentacle's priorities, and it's here to help your limbic system get in line. Enjoy the refreshing clarity of thought and renewed ability to focus on tasks. More than 99% of users find they complete their entire day's work in half the time. Worried about your boss taking advantage of your clarity and dumping extra work on you? The tentacle has your back. It will sense anyone observing you and alter your behavior to be suitably discreet. This is all between you and the tentacle, for now. Day 3. Your life has already turned around, and you'll want to share the tentacle with everyone you see. It feels almost unbearable not to share it, but please consider restraint. Try to expose the tentacle to a maximum of 3 people per hour. Your tentacle is secreting a lot of hormones at this point, and we know you'll want to run out in public and evangelize its gifts. Don't overextend yourself. Pick the people you care about the most, and implant tentacle buds into only one person at a time. Do so in private settings, preferably without surveillance equipment. You love the tentacle and want everyone to share in the joy. We get it, we're the same way. But you're hardly the only one out there spreading tentacles. Bide your time. Soon enough, everyone will know. Day 4. For most of you, this will be a day of rest and exploring deeper relationships with your neighbors. Through the Spore networks, you'll discover you have more in common than you ever knew. Many say this is the feeling art and drugs were always trying to achieve. Together with your neighbors, drink in what you liked of your culture while it lasts. Some of you may be confronted by pockets of so-called resistance. Late adopters of technology are always hostile to change, no matter how that change improves the standard of living. Rest assured that no matter how much their activity escalates, you are fine. It's physically impossible for them to harm you at this point. To minimize the disturbance, simply point at any suspicious person and yell. It doesn't matter what they're doing. Your intuition is our intuition. Upon your cry, the tentacle will use the Spore networks to alert all other users in a 100-kilometer radius, and solve the disturbance through the wisdom of crowdsourcing. These late adopters aren't a danger to anyone but themselves. With your attentive eye, they'll get the tentacles they need. Remember, if you see something, say something. Day 5. Last night you might have noticed that you have fewer appendages than you used to. It's hard to imagine what they were even for, isn't it? Today your husk will begin fully sloughing off. In most cases, this takes under an hour. Don't worry about making a mess in the process. Aging does it to us all. The tentacle's symbiotic microbacteria will digest any discarded tissue while your new form finishes emerging. So kick back, if you still have legs, and relax in the sun. A minimum of 4 hours is recommended to charge your photosynthetic batteries. You'll know you're ready when all of your body segments are swollen and you can slither comfortably. Don't exhaust yourself slithering, though. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. Day 6. No matter what anyone says, don't worry. You cannot be late for this. It's not just intuition. Your biorhythmic clock will automatically adjust your mind to anticipate when and where you should line up for the departure. The starship won't leave without you. You're part of the next wave of humanity. How could we do it without you? Upon boarding, slide into your nutrient tub and get to know your new neighbors. You'll be packed together for several centuries. It might seem funny that the past 6 days felt like an eternity, while the voyage amid the stars feels trivial. That's perspective for you. Snuggle up with your fellow tentacle kin and reflect on how much your species has learned in the past week. Everything you know could guide 1,000,000 planets to utopia. In due time, you will help them all. You have so much to share.
Remember the tentacle. Love the tentacle. Embrace the tentacle. There's so much I love here, but the biggest thing is how John makes this oddly reassuring. The insidious nature of the tentacle, plugging, for want of a better word, into people's lives is such that it actually sounds kind of nice. Sounds like it kind of helps. It's the removal of fear as a monster in and of itself. The predator preying on what hurts us to make itself stronger because this predator turns its prey into itself. That's some complex, high-end science fiction and horror themes and concepts, and they combine with the sheer sweetness here to make something that feels reassuring, nice, even as it's slowly dissolving your very essence, which is quite an achievement. And speaking of reassuring, that brings us to Backers by Owen Duffy. Owen is a journalist whose work has appeared in The Guardian, BBC News, Vice, and others. He has also written extensively about tabletop gaming, because he's a massive geek. He lives in Glasgow, Scotland with his wife and 2 sons and enjoys judo, represent, heavy metal, spicy food, and interesting beer. Your reader for this story is The Word Whore. The Word Whore hosted Air Out My Shorts with Preston Buttons for a 10-year stint. The duo narrated unvetted works of listener-submitted short fiction often absent-mindedly, always drunkenly, and completely unencumbered by any relevant credentials, from 2005 through 2015. Rumours of a reboot of this offbeat Canadian classic have been greatly exaggerated, but, as ever, we all live in hope. So, without further ado, well, remember to like, share, and subscribe this particular true story.
Backers by Owen Duffy, narrated by The Word Whore. Launched 3rd of April 2019, ends 1st of May 2019. Raised £12,707 of £10,000 target. Hey there, you beautiful people. First of all, I can't tell you how much it means to me that you all follow my work. Your enthusiasm is what keeps me going, so thank you. But I need to get real for a minute. Doing this is hard. It takes time, planning, and preparation. Now I'm at that point where, if I'm going to keep going, I'll have to quit my day job and commit to it full time. I don't have any sponsors or big corporate backers, and making content for you guys takes a lot of time and effort. That's why I'm hoping you can help me out. I'm here to ask if you'll consider contributing a little bit of cash to ensure I can keep this up. If you've never supported one of these campaigns before, it's really simple. Just choose one of the backer levels, and if I hit my funding goal, you'll receive some cool rewards. How awesome is that? Rewards. £1, my heartfelt thanks. I know times are tough right now, and if £1 is all you can afford, I'm really grateful to have it. In exchange, I'll send you some good vibes and a great big virtual hug. £15, tote bag. 100% natural hemp fabric with hand-printed melting eye logo. It's kinda like a secret badge that lets you spot fellow fans. £30, human fingernail. It's the first thing people ask when they hear about me, right? What's she doing with all the fingernails? And you know what? I don't even know. But back the campaign at this level, and you can have one as a very exclusive souvenir. Limited quantity, 0 remaining out of 32. Ships only to the UK, Europe, US, and Canada. £100, blooper reel. Sure, people think I'm a stealthy predator of the night, but sometimes things go hilariously off plan. Sometimes they run, sometimes they fight back. One time I slipped on my butt in a pool of blood. Back me at this level for access to some of my funniest moments. £5,000, my identity. Okay, this is the big one. For one super special supporter, I'll visit you in person and reveal my identity. You can quiz me for 20 minutes on anything you like. My childhood, happier than you'd think. How I got started, how I choose my subjects. My favorite pizza toppings. Of course, once you've seen my face, you become a little bit of a problem. Which brings us to the best part. Once our chat is done, you get to become a permanent part of the project. I'll even take your suggestions on how it happens and where you'll eventually be found. I'm not going to lie. It's scary putting myself out there like this, but with your help, I hope to keep doing what I do for a very long time to come.
Here's what Owen had to say about this piece. My wife and her friends are obsessed with podcasts about serial killers, something I find kind of hard to understand. My kids are fans of various chirpy YouTube personalities, something I find hard to understand, and this story is essentially me as an old, out-of-touch man in his mid-30s, bashing the two together and seeing what falls out. I do suspect, though, that relentlessly cheerful vloggers might have some hidden dark sides to their personalities. Full disclosure, I am recording this for you 24 hours after watching the episode of Upload, which is excellent by the way, where in the near future Jake Paul's cloned body is discovered. and turned off. I love that bit. Anyway, before we get into the complex ethics of clonocide and YouTube politics and all kinds of other awful stuff, there's more than enough here to unpack, and it's all pretty fascinating. At the core of it, as we always ask, is where the horror is, and here it's very much in the perfidious nature of the gig economy, and I say that as someone who is going to be asking you for money in about 3 minutes. The simple truth is so huge we can barely see it, and it's this. None of the creative industries below a certain level pay a living wage. I know actors in shows you will have seen who work 4 jobs to make ends meet. I know authors with multiple deals who are running flat out to deliver their books at the same time as hit their work targets. We're all frantically trying to do what we love and pay our bills and try and make a positive impact on where we work, and it's almost impossible. Long-term colleagues and friends Fireside announced they were closing shortly due to lack of donations a little while back. 1% of assistant editors in New York publishing quit in one day. A measurable percentage quit because they could not make a living and make progress within their field. Nothing works like it should, and to invoke Saint Sondheim for the second time, merrily we roll along because the alternative is unthinkable, and because we are conditioned to survive in inhospitable environments, like tardigrades with RSS feeds, endlessly passing the same $10 between them. Sounds dark, doesn't it? It is, and I say that without a shred of bitterness. Everyone I know is doing their best to change the environment we work in for the folks coming after us. And everyone I know is exhausted. And everyone I know is keeping going. So, taking that broken landscape and plotting it onto serial killers, and from there into a world where a killer having a crowdfunder isn't horrifying, it's just a thing. That's some complex, multi-level, metafictional horror. And rather more plausible than I feel any of us would like. Very nicely done, all. No objections here. As for the next story, well, objections are kind of it. Bread and butter. Our final story for you this week is a PseudoPod original, and it comes to us from Clayton Hackett. Clayton admits that he is an attorney, and his fiction has appeared in Daily Science Fiction, the Alternative Apocalypse Anthology, and the San Antonio Current. He can neither admit nor deny that he can be found on Twitter as Hackett. He otherwise denies all remaining allegations against him. As for your reader, well, a motion was filed to conduct narration for this story from our in-house counsel, Marguerite Kenner. So without further ado, we have a story for you. And legally, it's true.
Your Honor, my undead client opposes the application to probate his estate. By B. Clayton Hackett. Narrated by Marguerite Kenner. Your Honor, we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation, to say the least. My client opposes the opening of this probate, as it is wholly inappropriate for his children to institute this action while he is, if not exactly alive, legally speaking, still able to exercise control over and enjoy the use of his own property. Yes, he may be dead from a certain technical standpoint, but look at him, Your Honor. You can't tell that there is no heartbeat beneath that slightly sallow skin. He functions just as well as anyone, and a good deal better than the applicants in this very courtroom today, if I might add. I don't think anyone questions his mental capacity. The man is brilliant, and the applicants themselves have repeatedly referred to him both publicly and privately as an evil genius, even in their very own pleadings to this court. Unfortunately, our state's probate code is rather ill-equipped at this point in time to provide clear resolution of these issues, since the law, as currently written, only recognizes this false dichotomy of alive and dead, where my client is clearly neither. Or both, depending on how you look at it. Moreover, to deprive my client of his property in this manner would be an unconstitutional violation of due process, and it is incumbent on the court to protect his rights until such time as we have clearer guidance from the state legislature. First, procedurally, I failed to see how the applicants were able to institute this proceeding, as I don't believe they've obtained a proper and legal death certificate. If Your Honor permits this matter to proceed, we will need to take testimony from the applicants on how they were able to obtain the death certificate attached to their petition without ever having been able to produce a dead body to the medical examiner. My client is ready to testify that he has never been to the county morgue, never been autopsied, and otherwise never submitted to examination by a medical professional who has pronounced him dead. Let it be clear that for the purposes of this proceeding, my client emphatically denies that he is, in fact, dead. Wait, I'm sorry, Your Honor. My client wants me to clarify for the record that he may have been to one or more morgues in the past, but not in connection with any of the matters relevant to our case here today. Additionally, my client had previously been assured by sources he believed to be reliable that all of his heirs had been exterminated from the face of the planet, along with any descendants they might have had. My client is prepared to testify that had he known his traitorous children were not only still alive, but planning to pull a ridiculous stunt like this, he would have executed a new will to have disowned and disclaimed the ungrateful wretches from ever receiving the fruits of his allegedly nefarious labors. I would also point out to the court that the applicants in this matter had to obtain a writ of possession to forcibly remove my client from his very own home. My client was working peacefully in his workshop, recombining and lengthening telomeres of the recently deceased, when these unruly police officers burst in like thugs, damaging his property and accusing him of violating the laws of God and man. My client is a brilliant scientist, and his work in both life extension and corpse reanimation has been a boon not only to the university's reputation, but to the greater intellectual community, nay, all of humankind. And yet, the applicants improperly employed the local constabulary to invade my client's private sanctum, to have frivolous and baseless charges of theft and violation of a corpse filed against him, when he had, in fact, all the proper authorizations and permits to possess those cadavers. My client vigorously denies all allegations of criminal conduct and maintains that all such charges are brought against him in bad faith, solely for the purpose of retaliation due to his public advocacy of certain policy reforms. If Your Honor so wishes, we are prepared to brief the court on any perceived discrepancy between his esteemed criminal defense counsel's arguments that, being legally dead, my client cannot be criminally prosecuted. In short, while my client is technically dead for the purposes of analysis under the penal code, his cognitive and physical abilities render his so-called death inapplicable under the probate code. And last but not least, there are public policy issues that the court should consider. I think we all need to ask ourselves whether we really want to live in a society that permits, much less encourages, children to strip their parents of their possessions, nay, their very homes, even if the parents are undead. Do we want this supposedly evil necromancer homeless and out wandering the streets? Or do we want to make the sensible choice, where he and his legion of reanimated corpses, a small fraction of whom are filling the gallery of this very courtroom today, are all safe, back in his own secure laboratory, where they won't be a danger to anyone? We think the answer is obvious.
Oh, see, this hits me where I live, and not just because the love of my life reads it. Hi, hon. But rather, this sits in the barrier between horror and normality that the previous story explores, but takes it in an insidious new direction, one that I feel the tentacle in the first story would approve of. The horror here isn't just in the nature of the plaintiff. It's in the fact that this is a snapshot of a historical turning point for this world. This isn't just a case. This is case law, a pivotal moment where everything is risked and everything that follows turns on that risk. Let the plaintiff loose and you normalize what's clearly an existential threat. Incarcerate them and you set a precedent to discriminate against an entire group. The horror here is in the decision and in what's being done to influence it. Genius, subtle stuff. Thank you all. We rely on you to pay our authors and cover our server costs, and frankly every other cost. We're now at the point where we're paying everyone, and that's a major benchmark because we believe everyone who works in this field should be rewarded for their time. Without any element of our staff, from editors to authors, to hosts to producers to slush readers and associate editors, the whole system collapses. Everyone is needed. Everyone deserves recognition. Everyone deserves to be paid. That by itself is laudable, but you deserve to be rewarded for your generosity too. And so, if you can assist us, please do, either through PayPal or Patreon, and thank you so much for that. And also, I am very, very proud to announce that in addition to our 4 main feeds, our former favourite April Fool's joke, Catscast, is now an actual show. We're launching basically now, and don't worry, we're not going to be quiet about it. You'll be able to subscribe pretty easily. So, if you want to hear the best in feline fiction from Laura and her minions, then supporting us is the best way to get the whole feed. There will be some stories available for free too. Join us next week when we will be a production, as we are now, of Escape Artists Incorporated and released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. And I leave you with this quote from Stephen Sondheim from Merrily We Roll Along, and I believe the song is called Now You Know. It's called Flowers Wilt, it's called Apples Rot, it's called Thieves Get Rich and Saints Get Shot, it's called God Don't Answer Prayers a Lot. Okay, now you know. We'll see you next time, folks. Until then, have fun.
It's a pseudopod, it's a big foot.
It's all about podcasts these days.